Dynamax is the newest battle gimmick from Game Freak, which defined the Galar region in Pokemon Sword and Shield. It was met with a mixed response from fans, as many were confused or disappointed by its announcement. At least it was an armor evolution, right? Upon the game's actual release, the mechanic was criticized by many competitive players for how unbalanced it was, centralizing entire battles around the moment of Dynamax and cementing setup sweeping with a select few Pokemon as the best strategy. Smogon players specifically weren't comfortable with its unpredictability and vast increase in potential options per turn. However, some players found a more positive view of Dynamax, particularly in VGC where there was never an option to turn it off and there are more viable strategies to deal with the mechanic. Still, even among Dynamax's fans, there's nothing resembling a consensus that the mechanic was perfectly implemented. Because of this controversy, I often find myself wondering how could we fix Dynamax? Personally, I like certain things about it, but I also find myself unsatisfied with many of its elements. And there are a lot of elements to cover. Unlike Megas or Z moves, Dynamax has a rather large list of quirks. So before getting into ideal changes, let's quickly review how Dynamax already works. So Dynamax can be activated on almost any Pokemon at any time once per battle. It's selected and activated for any moves, which is kind of like Megas and Z moves, and lasts for 3 turns. Dynamaxing doubles a Pokemon's HP stat. This is kind of the central point of the mechanic. The ability to make your Pokemon bulkier in a given time, making them take hits they normally couldn't think of. Percentage-based HP modifiers, like berries, use the original HP stat, so an example might be that Super Fang only cuts 25% of a Dynamax Pokemon's health bar instead of 50%, but it's still dealing the original damage it would to the Pokemon. Another one of the very unique things about Dynamax compared to something like Megas or Z moves is that there's a very long laundry list of things that Dynamax Pokemon are entirely immune to. So some of these things are flinching, weight-based moves like Heavy Slam, one-hit KO moves like Fissure, Destiny Bond, and certain forms of ability sharing. So Skill Swap, for example, won't work on Dynamax Pokemon for some reason. An opponent's forced switching, like Roar, won't work on a Dynamax Pokemon. Disable, Torment, Encore, Instruct all don't work on a Dynamax Pokemon. And then choice items, Guerrilla Tactics, and Sheer Force. If your Dynamax Pokemon has one of those abilities or is holding one of those items, like Choice Band, then it will not gain the benefits from those items. But as we discussed later, that's arguably a good thing. So all of the Pokemon's moves become a new move based on their type. You have things like Max Overgrowth for grass types. There are 18 different non-exclusive attacking max moves, and then all status moves become Max Guard, which is a beefed up protect. So that again is kind of a far cry from Z moves, where a lot of the status moves had entirely unique effects. For here, they just all become a big protect. The thing on this list that makes Dynamax strong is its undeniably a double HP stat, which makes sense as it's the core of the mechanic, and also makes it most unique. In an attempt to make the mechanic more balanced, you could lower the HP modifiers from like 1.5, but I think because it's this main idea of the mechanic and doing the math with double HP is much more intuitive than multiplying it by 1.5, I think it's probably best to try and keep the HP as it is and work from there. It's also important to note that a lot of Pokemon probably had the power level of their attacks balanced around Dynamax. So these would be Pokemon like Dracovish or Rillaboom or Urshifu that just hit insanely hard against Pokemon that have it Dynamaxed. As for the existing immunities, some of them make sense, but others just seem kind of arbitrary or lazy. The goal is to make it so that Dynamax can't be easily stopped or made too powerful by a simple status move, while still allowing as many moves and effects as possible to be compatible, just so that it doesn't flip the game and your viable strategies as much. So now I'll go over every different immunity that Dynamax has and try to determine whether or not it makes sense, if it should be kept or if it should be removed altogether. So we'll start with flinching. This one's undeniably one of the most important, especially in doubles where everyone is under the constant fear of fake out. Wasting one of your 3 turns with flinching would be far too easy for your opponents to take out your Dynamax Pokemon, and make things like Fake Out, Togekiss, or Jirachi even more unbearable than they already are. So this one should definitely stay. It's also worth noting that something like the Flinch Immunity is really almost an important balancing measure for VGC just because of how omnipresent things like Incineroar were before. I believe in Gen 7, Incineroar had about like a 90% usage rate at one point, and that went down to at its best around like 50% for the Dynamax Sword and Shield VGC metas. So that's a good example of Dynamax actually kind of balancing something in some way where it makes the omnipresent fake out less useful. So next we have weight-based moves. So I feel like this one had little to do with balance since weight-based moves were in no way dominant before Dynamax, and they were usually only being run as coverage options in like restricted metas with many heavy legendaries that could have used the weight differences. It seems they didn't want to work with how Dynamax would affect weight in battle. Maybe that was from like a lore standpoint, but even if these forms are projections, as has been said in some interviews, it's clear they'd still be very heavy with all the damage they can cause. So maxing them out to the maximum weight of like 999 kilograms makes sense. Grass Knot and Low Kick become more desirable cover options, while Heavy Slam and Heat Crash suffer, but at least they're doing like 40 damage to your Dynamax Pokemon instead of not damaging them at all like they currently do. Seeing that blank Pokemon shook its head message is always just so infuriating for me. So this one will go away. Weight-based move immunity doesn't need to stay around. So next we have one-hit KO moves and Destiny Bond. There's not much to say about these because they make perfect sense. Taking out all that HP in a single blow is just too easy with these types of moves, and they would quickly become mandatory anywhere Dynamax was legal, just because that risk of like, oh, 30% hit that sheer cold becomes such a higher reward move because you're just taking out their big Pokemon instantly. So that one's definitely going to have to stay, that immunity. Let's see, so ability sharing. This immunity seems simply unnecessary. Skill swap or entrainment strategies have their uses, but are for the most part not very good. Boosting your Dynamax Pokemon by giving it a better ability might be interesting to toy around with, but would not be terribly dominant even on something like Regigigas, who becomes very good if you can get rid of its ability. This is because there's no Pokemon with skill swap that has a really broken ability like Huge Power. It should also be noted that since ability suppression like Worry Seed and Gastro Acid already works in Dynamax anyway, there's really no point to this immunity. So this one's going away. So opponents force switching. This is a tougher one. Moves like Roar and items like Red Card would likely shut down Dynamax a little too easily, but are also usually vital for stopping setup sweepers from being too powerful in singles, and their failure to work against it was one of the most important elements of Dynamax's ban from OU in most 6v6 singles formats. However, it's still best to keep this immunity to effects like Roar intact, as the max move stat boost that made Dynamax's immunity to phasing such a problem will be handled later. It should also be noted for the uninitiated that eject button already works on Dynamax. This is obviously a bit of an exception since in theory that's the player deciding to switch out their Dynamax Pokemon, even if opponents can abuse this with like trick strategies and get a eject button onto your Dynamax Pokemon. So this one's definitely staying. Next up we have Disable and Torment. While they would certainly waste turns of Dynamax as with Flinching, they require more prediction to be properly used, don't always work immediately, and the afflicted player can still work around them with proper move selection. Since Taunt works in Dynamax, it seems especially unfair and inconsistent that these should fail, even if they can restrict damaging moves. So the immunity to Disable and Torment is definitely going to go. Encore. Encore is a little different from Disable and Torment, in that it can make a Dynamax Pokemon completely useless very easily, as opposed to just forcing them to use less optimal moves. Any Dynamax Pokemon pondering Max Guard while there was a Whimsicott or other fast Encore user on the field would have to forget about it, since the remaining Dynamax turns would no doubt be wild away doing nothing at all. There's no question this immunity needs to stay intact. Instruct. This move is only in a single Pokemon, and one that's never been a huge presence, so it might be fine if Instruct worked on a Dynamax Pokemon for that reason. However, making Instruct compatible with Dynamax seems like it has enough risks where it might be like a bad idea. Being able to pull off two Dynamax moves in one turn seems like it could be a real problem, even if it has to be the same move. I feel like this is one of those things that if it actually released, we could probably find out it's fine, even though it looks extremely broken on paper, like Dracovish, for doubles at least. But I'm going to play on the side of caution and say that the Instruct immunity should stay. Next up, we have Choice Items and Guerrilla Tactics. These not working with Dynamax makes some sense, since being locked into one move hampers the versatility of the mechanic, and still getting the boost without being locked into that one move would not be balanced. A major complaint OU players had about Dynamax was that this ability to break free of choice items made it too easy to beat walls with choice attackers, but it's also notable that a Pokemon being able to keep its stab boost, especially speed from Scarf, while doubling HP and gaining a stronger attack could become its own problem in the very offensive Battle Stadium singles. That being said, even if balancing Dynamax for 6v6 singles specifically is a bit of a lost cause, ensuring that choice items stay activated for Dynamax seems like one of the best steps towards that. And in the case of Battle Spot singles, we're getting rid of those stat boosts that are so powerful there anyway, so I'd say making choice items work with Dynamax is kind of an even trade. So the immunity to choice items and Guerrilla Tactics will be going. Up next, we have Sheer Force. From my own VGC experience, Sheer Force abusers make poor Dynamaxers, as they lose that crucial damage boost and also start taking damage from Life Orb. They gain the benefits of Dynamax moves, of course, but many other Pokemon abuse those benefits more effectively while also having abilities that may actually help them. Something like Sheer Force Nidoking becomes really useless when you Dynamax it, because it's doing less damage than it normally would, so unless you really need to take those hits or get that Dynamax effect, which are pretty niche scenarios, then you're not getting any benefit from your Sheer Force Dynamaxer. So for the sake of allowing Sheer Force Pokemon to not be unnecessarily burdened with their ability while Dynamaxed, they should lose the extra effect of Dynamax moves while still getting the 1.3 boost and negating Life Orb damage. So the Sheer Force immunity goes. Now that we've finished our list, I'll include an honorable mention, which is weakness policy. It's not technically an existing immunity, but something worth discussing. So Dynamaxing a Pokemon holding weakness policy has become pretty infamous among VGC players. It's by far the defining interaction of Dynamaxing and doubles, punishing opponents for daring to hit you with a move that will do more damage. It's been key to many good strategies with Gen 8 VGC, such as the early Rhyperior Trick Room teams, Glastrier, Galarian Moltres, the Colossal teams which won 2 consecutive Players' Cups, and many others. While this interaction, as well as Dynamax in general, has encouraged the use of strategies to weaken as opposed to directly damaging the opponent's Pokemon, like Eerie Impulse or the ever-present Will-O-Wisp, it's still a very annoying risk. Enough players have complained about the dynamic where it definitely seems to be a problem, but there also seems to be no clear consensus that it's outright broken, so I don't think it makes sense to have Dynamax not work with weakness policy. Now that the existing immunities and mechanics changes brought on by Dynamax have been reassessed, it's time to handle the biggest question, the max moves themselves. These effects are, in my opinion, the worst balanced part of the mechanic, due to some effects simply being so much better than others. To make matters worse, some types are already better offensively than others, and Game Freak didn't seem to give much consideration to whether or not they were giving the strongest types the strongest effects. So the effects I'm about to list, these are the ones that I think are okay. These ones can probably stay. We have Max Guard, which blocks all attacks, including max moves. Very straightforward. We have Max Overgrowth, that summons grassy terrain. Not too many in-depth strategies with that. Usually you're just bringing back grassy terrain for Rillaboom to use Grassy Glide with, but the healing can be vital for maybe picking back up a Sash or something like that. We have Max Flare, which summons Sun. This is very good if you want to get Sun up, but you probably would mainly use Nefer Venusaur to make your fire attacks more powerful. We have Max Geyser that summons Rain. Once again, good to make your water attacks more powerful. Very useful to weaken fire. You could perhaps use it with Kingdra to get your rain back up, which is always a big deal. We have Max Lightning, which summons electric terrain. Not many uses for that if you're really worried about an Among Us. If you're really worried about it can make your electric moves more powerful, though it doesn't work if you're flying, which is a shame because a lot of the best electric types float off the ground. It's always useful if you see an Amoonguss on the ground. I believe a Regigigas from one of the Players' Cups brought Thunder Punch, which might have been for that, so I'm not sure what the electric coverage was for, unless they really hated Tapu Fini that much. Anyway, we have Max Rockfall. That's a really good one. You get Sand, which can break Sashes, and also boost your special defense if you're a Rock type, which is useful. You have Max Mindstorm, which summons Psychic terrain, so there's a nice boost to your Psychic attacks, and, priority immunity, which can be huge to block Fake Out and Sucker Punch. And then we have Max Starfall, which summons Misty Terrain. So Misty Terrain weakens the power of Dragon moves against grounded Pokemon, and immunity status. With immunity status being the really useful thing there, that's good if you want to protect your Metagross or your Glastrier from a burn. But the Dragon part can be useful too, just not that often, since Dragon moves are kind of rare. Finally, we have Max Hailstorm, which summons Hail. It's probably the least useful of these effects, but the chip damage is always good to remove Sashes, and it can also maybe activate some of your Hail-based moves and abilities like Slush Rush or Aurora Veil, but those are pretty rare, generally speaking. So these moves all have effects that I think are well balanced enough, even if they can sometimes be really good with certain combos, like Max Geyser and a Swift Swim Pokemon. These effects are all fitting for the type and don't always guarantee a sweep, especially since they can all be stalled out and wear off with time. So the stat boosting moves tend to be the biggest problem. This is especially true in singles formats, though it definitely still applies to doubles. Being able to land devastating hits while also raising the power, bulk, or speed of your own Pokemon multiplies the threat posed by sleepers to an unmanageable extent. In my experience, these moves have come to define Dynamax formats, especially on Battle Stadium singles, aka ranked singles, entirely for that reason. As a result, it seems best to simply replace the stat buff effect with some that are more mild but still fitting for the types. So we start with Max Airstream, which used to give +1 speed, but will now apply the defog effect. Max Airstream was easily the most broken Max move, as its speed boost would often single-handedly make clearing out the opponent's team possible. To make matters worse, it didn't have a power cap of 95 like the other two offensive boosting moves, Max Knuckle and Max Ooze. Even worse than that, no Pokemon is immune to flying unlike with fighting or poison, meaning that the speed boost happens no matter what switch a player makes. The defog effect stolen from Gmax Corviknight is still useful and fitting without going overboard. It can clear the hazards that are omnipresent nuisance in OU and other singles tiers, as well as screens, which are fairly common in VGC and Battle Stadium singles. The removal of terrain can be a nice bonus as well when trying to weaken meta Pokemon like Tapu Fini, Rillaboom, and Indeedee. It can backfire sometimes, but not too often since flying types can't benefit from terrain anyway. Lowering the evasiveness of foes is a nice bonus as well, even if it won't come in handy all the time. So next up we have Max Ooze, which used to give +1 special attack. It now applies Gastro Acid to both of the opponents, and its 95 base power cap has been lifted, so it can go up to 140 or 150 like other Max moves. So Max Ooze, despite being useful, was still in a fairly awkward position. For the bonus of its offensive boosting, it had to suffer a 95 power cap, actively weakening any physical Dynamaxer who wants to use a poison move. And on top of this, it's still not working if you hit Steel, so even special attackers have to be careful. This is definitely the boosting Dynamax move that saw the least abuse overall, but may as well still be revamped with the others. The new Gastro Acid effect, while still being somewhat niche, allows the move to be much more effective when the power cap of 95 is lifted, and most strong moves will go to 120, 130, or 140 power. A lot of the best abilities that are instant activation, like Intimidate, Download, and Psychic Surge, won't be bothered, but plenty of other top tier abilities like Prankster, Levitate, and Chilling/Grimnade can still be disrupted. Drapion and his physically inclined pals are extremely grateful. Next up, we have Max Knuckle, which used to give +1 attack and have a 95 base power cap. Our new version will give the focus energy effect for both Pokemon on your side, and the 95 base power cap is now lifted. So Max Knuckle was in a similar position to Max Ooze, suffering a 95 base power cap and getting completely blocked by Ghost, although it was definitely a little better off considering literally every fighting type is either a physical attacker or has strong mixed potential, meaning attack can almost always be useful as a boost on a fighting type. However, the move's coverage was still rather lackluster, with special attackers of other types, particularly Psychic, finding themselves annoyed when their coverage for dark types got weaker with basically no benefit upon Dynamax. For the new version, we once again steal from Gmax, this time Machamp. The focus energy effect, with the old power cap now lifted, results in Max Knuckle being more reliable. The increased crit rate also gives players a way to support the team's offense without having to attack with a certain type. By boosting the crit rate of the user and its ally, Max Knuckle turns up the pressure and downplays the threat posed by things like Iron Defense body press strategies. In addition, it can gain the usual benefits of being a crit move, ignoring stat boost and screens. With this change, Max Knuckle loses its snowballing potential for problematic Dynamax sweeps and singles, while also gaining an immediate power and universal support effect that was lacking for doubles. So next up we have Max Steel Spike. This one used to give +1 defense, and now gives the effect of Lucky Chant, which protects your team from crits for 5 turns. So Max Steel Spike was similar to Max Airstream, with the effect being so beneficial that Pokemon who would otherwise never consider Steel coverage, such as Snorlax and Glastrier, would end up running Steel moves just for the Dynamax effect. This is because, like Max Airstream, the boost to your stats is guaranteed regardless of what Pokemon switches into the moves, as nothing is immune to Steel. A defense boost that goes along with big damage is a ludicrously potent tool, especially on Pokemon that already have good natural bulk like Excadrill. The new crit prevention effect is a lot less potent, but still very fitting for the defensive nature of the type, and can be very helpful for bulky Pokemon that want to block any chance of taking more damage than expected. It's especially nice against the ever-prominent likes of Urshifu, significantly weakening the signature moves of both its forms. With the Max Knuckle change in mind as well, there should be a good degree of strategic use of this move to prevent any chance of crits coming in and beating your win conditions. Alright, next up we have Max Quake. Max Quake used to give a +1 special defense boost, and now it has the effect of Gravity, which grounds opponents and lowers their evasion stat. Max Quake was arguably the best Dynamax move after Max Airstream. Like Steel Spike, it dishes out massive damage while also providing a valuable defensive boost. but unlike Steel Spike, it can fail if a flying type or floating Pokemon switches in. However, this is more than made up for the fact that Ground has fantastic coverage on the vast majority of Pokemon, being vital to hit prominent types like Steel and Electric. Steel coverage, on the other hand, is somewhat niche outside of hitting fairies. Thus, not only did Max Quake provide an opportunity to deal damage while boosting yourself, it was also on one of the best coverage types in the game. The new effect has its own significant benefit, at least in doubles, where you could have something like Landorus target a Pokemon next to something like Rotom and be able to hit that Rotom next turn. However, no such consistent option exists in singles, since your opponent has to let you hit a non-floating Pokemon with Max Quake before the gravity effect can be activated to nail flying Pokemon. But there could be some strategic use here. Since there's so many ways to play around it, and the gravity effect can also have consequences for yourself or your team if your opponent has, say, Sleep Powder, this version is definitely nerfed compared to the overbearing original, even with its advantages. But it has a nice little trick to it with being able to hit things like Celesteela if you play right. Next are for the stat lowering moves. These are not as prominent as the boosting moves, and are generally fairly well balanced in my opinion. They add a little extra punishment for your opponents without snowballing your Pokemon's strength. So these are Max Strike, which lowers speed. This one rarely sees use. You might rarely use it on like a Pokemon with Fake Out or something if you need to lower speed in a pinch, but more likely you're just going to see it on those rare normal attackers like Regigigas and Porygon Z. Very potent, obviously, because speed lowering is so good, but there's not many good normal Pokemon to abuse it, and other Pokemon don't find running normal coverage to be worth it. So we have Max Flutterby, which lowers the opponent's special attack. That one's decent. It's quite a good effect, but because Bug is so lackluster offensively, you rarely see it. They set them maybe on the occasional thing like Landorus or Incineroar that runs U-turns sometimes. Bug types are pretty non-existent in VGC in general, but this one's pretty good when it does come up. Next, you have Max Wormwood, which lowers the opponent's attack. This one's definitely the best of the bunch, but once again, dragons aren't the most common. And even when you're running them, you might not always have room for a dragon move because it's constantly a coverage. But if you are to run a dragon move, oftentimes it's motivated in part by Wormwind, because lowering the opponent's attack is always one of the best effects in the game, as Intimidate always highlights. However, some of the stat-lowering max moves still need a rework, specifically Max Darkness and Max Phantasm. These two can be really useless for physical dark types and special ghost types, except occasionally in doubles where they can soften opponents for a special physical partner, but the game has to happen to align that way for them to not be useless. It can also work in singles, but again, it's a lot of foreplanning for your big Dynamax moves. Additionally, they can make strong special dark types like Galarian Moltres or physical ghosts like Marshadow even more overbearing as Dynamax sweepers. These problems warrant some adjustments, even if they're not as severe as moves like Max Airstream or Max Quake. Alright, so for Max Phantasm, we used to have the -1 defense effect on opponents. Now we'll have the Mist effect. So this new effect is definitely a nerf for physical attackers, but of course that's the idea. Still, the ability to block Intimidate after landing this move is nice, especially in doubles where the Ghost leading Incineroar lurks around every corner. Special attackers like Spectre and Gengar undoubtedly get above in the doubles environment, considering the prominence of Snarl and Eerie Impulse in the format. Defense dropping against walls for the rest of the team was definitely useful, but didn't always aid these special ghosts directly when trying to abuse their Dynamax in the way that Mist does. So next up we have Max Darkness, which used to be -1 special defense for opponents, and now is the Torment effect. This one's once again stolen directly from G-Max Melmetal. This effect is too fitting not to use for Dark, in my opinion. Taunt could have worked too, but would probably be too broken for its ability to instantly shut down Trick Room, Protect, and Max Guard. But Torment is still a good status move to instantly land on both foes, especially since Dynamax Pokemon's immunity tool was removed. This prevents Dynamax opponents from spamming their best max move over and over, and can also disrupt highly spammable regular moves like Wicked Blow, Snarl, or Follow Me. There's no immediate benefit to the move like with some others, but the longer term advantage is definitely worth it. Now the question is, how much more balanced will this updated version of the Dynamax mechanic be? It likely wouldn't be enough to get Dynamax unbanned from OU, since even with choice items now locking in Dynamax Pokemon, the Council would still take issue with the vastly increased options it provides and the rewarding of short-term prediction over long-term planning. Their words, not mine. However, in singles formats like Ubers, where tierheads didn't object as much to the base of the mechanic, it would be a lot more bearable since the worst of its sleeping potential has been eliminated. Battle Stadium singles and VGC would still be Dynamax-centric with these changes, but no longer would Max Airstream rule the speed control game, and a Pokemon's coverage would largely go back to being based on type coverage and not bonuses since the new effects are more situational. Grass Knot and Low Kick become reliably hard-hitting moves guaranteed 120 base power against anything Dynamax, and Disable adds one new option for messing with Dynamax Pokemon as well, although it probably won't be the most common thing. I don't think the face of VGC in particular changes that much, since Dynamaxing was always more useful for the abuse of bulk and attack power than the stat boosts themselves. though those stat boosts were stupidly useful, so at least those being removed will make the game a little more balanced. I'm interested to hear what you guys think. Was I too easy on Dynamax? Too harsh? Should weakness policy even banish the depths of uselessness along with Colossal? Nothing I enjoy more than overthinking a mechanic that'll be gone in a year anyway. Catch you guys next time.